Hi, I'm odorless, and I woke up in a hospital bed, bruised, stitched, and alone. The trip to Rome, I paid for it, but they took it, without me, left me behind like I was carry-on they meant to forget. And my mom's only message? Don't bother calling, we're having pasta. That moment, it shattered more than trust. But this time, I didn't cry. I made a different kind of call. One they'll remember for the rest of their lives. Have you ever been left behind by your own family? Drop your story below. You're not alone. I woke up to a rhythmic beeping, sharp, unrelenting. The fluorescent lights above me hummed like a whisper I couldn't quite place. There was something sticky on my chest, a tug near my ribs, and then pain. Not screaming pain, but the kind that creeps in like a tide, quiet, full, unrelenting. My fingers twitched toward the blanket, stiff, cold. A hospital gown. I blinked again. Tubes, monitors, the faint smell of antiseptic. Then the ache in my ribs reminded me I was still alive. But my first thought wasn't survival. It was Mom. Had she called? Left a message? I turned my head toward the stand by the bed. No flowers, no card, just the glass of water the nurse must have brought earlier. I didn't know the time. Only that the sky outside the window had dimmed into that bluish-gray shade between late afternoon and nightfall. I closed my eyes and reached back to the last thing I remembered, the sound of screeching tires, metal folding, then nothing, the crash, and then the silence. That morning felt like a world away. I'd been running late. A client had moved our meeting up, and I'd skipped breakfast to make it on time. The GPS was shouting turns while I applied lip balm at a red light. Right then, Mom had called, not to check in on me. She never did that. No, she wanted to remind me that Lyle needed help packing for his graduation trip. He's a mess with organization, she said. And he's never flown international. You know he won't remember his passport unless someone's there to triple-check it. I muttered, I have a meeting, Mom. She barely paused. Well, try to drop by this evening if you can. And don't forget, he leaves tomorrow morning. I said I'd see what I could do. I always said that, and I always showed up. I'd helped Lyle with every major milestone in his life. College apps, first car loan. I even co-signed on that ridiculous crypto investment he swore would make us both rich. It didn't. But I never told our parents. It would have tarnished his future, as Mom used to say. I sighed, reaching for my phone on the tray beside me. The nurse must have left it there while I was still under. One missed call. Lyle. I tapped the voicemail icon with a trembling thumb. His voice came through clear, cocky as ever. Hey, just wanted to let you know, we're boarding now. Don't call while we're in Rome. Cell service is a mess. Mom says you'll be fine. That was it. 12 seconds. We're boarding now. That meant they were already at the airport when I was being wheeled into surgery. I stared at the wall in front of me. They knew, and they still left. While I lay here, bruised, bleeding, alone. The nurse came in not long after, a gentle woman with short gray curls and kind eyes. She smiled. You've got some pretty nasty injuries, hun. 3 cracked ribs and a dislocated shoulder. But you're stable now. Anyone coming by to see you tonight? I nodded. Yes, my family's just running late. Lie, clean, simple. She smiled politely, but I saw it in her eyes. She knew. I turned my head to the window again. It had started to rain. Not a dramatic storm, just that soft, endless drizzle that somehow made everything quieter. Dinner came, some sort of mushy casserole I didn't touch. The water had gone lukewarm. I opened Instagram. I wish I hadn't. There it was, a photo of my mother and Lyle smiling with champagne glasses in hand, standing beneath a first-class lounge sign. She had captioned it, "So proud of our boy. Rome, here we come." No mention of the accident. No words like, "Hope she recovers," or "Thinking of you, sweetheart." Just smiles. Luxury, toasting to a future I apparently wasn't invited into. I swallowed hard. The nurse had turned the overhead lights low. It made the screen glow brighter in my hands. Too bright. I locked the phone and pressed it to my chest. There had been a time when I thought being the strong one mattered. When they called me resilient, I wore it like a badge. I told myself I was the reliable daughter, the one who didn't need cheering up, or big graduation send-offs, or Instagram tributes. But tonight, it felt like a punishment. Rain kept tracing lines down the glass, and in the hallway, I heard laughter. Someone's visitor had brought pizza and balloons. Not mine. I curled slightly on my side, wincing at the sharp stab in my ribs. I wasn't angry yet. Not really. I was numb. That would change. Because while my body might take weeks to heal, something else had already broken beyond repair, and the only person who showed up that night wasn't who I expected. The last glow of light from the hallway dimmed as the nurse pulled the door to a soft click behind her. Outside, the world was quiet again, just the low hum of machines and the faint rain tapping against the hospital window. I had tried to sleep, but even with pain meds dulling the edge of my ribs, my mind kept circling the same truth. They left. They knew. They left anyway. I was somewhere between restless and exhausted when I heard the footsteps, not the hurried, efficient stride of a nurse. These were slower, heavier, like someone unsure if they belonged here. Then came the knock. Soft, hesitant. I blinked, trying to sit up, only to wince and drop back against the pillow. A moment later, the door creaked open, and the night nurse peeked her head in. "There's someone here for you," she said quietly. I wasn't expecting anyone. "Your mom?" she asked gently, but I shook my head before she could finish. Then I saw her, framed in the doorway under the pale hallway lights. Aunt Glynis, not my mother, not Lyle, not even a cousin from the sidelines of family functions. No, my estranged father's only sister. A woman I hadn't seen since the Thanksgiving 5 years ago when she cornered me in the kitchen and whispered, "You're not like your mom. That's a good thing." Back then, I didn't know what she meant. Now, I did. She stepped in slowly, a brown handbag clutched tightly against her side, like she wasn't sure if I'd throw her out. "Odalys," she said with a faint nod. "You look awake." I didn't speak. I just watched her lower herself into the guest chair near the foot of my bed, adjusting her coat but never making eye contact. She didn't ask how I was doing, didn't ask about the accident, didn't even look at the machines beeping beside me. Instead, she cleared her throat. "Your parents are concerned." A bitter laugh almost escaped me. Concerned? "They're just worried you might do something rash," she added, smoothing her skirt like she was reading from a script. "You know how things can get. If this becomes a bigger deal. Public, even." I stared. "They asked me to check on you," she continued, voice clipped. "Just in case. Lyle's trip is important right now. This is his opportunity. His big moment." I couldn't help myself. "His big moment?" She nodded, like that settled it. "You understand, right?" It was suddenly so cold in the room, not from the air, from the words. She wasn't here out of love. She was a delivery person, a carrier of damage control. I looked at her, really looked at her. Same gold watch she used to wear, same prim little scarf tucked into her collar, the same eyes that once saw through the surface. But tonight, they were dull, complicit. I steadied my voice. "Did they tell you I could have died?" Glynis blinked, shifted. "They said you were stable, that you're always tough." There it was again, that word, tough. I turned my face to the side so she wouldn't see the moisture building in my eyes. It wasn't just a word, it was the excuse, the shield, the way they let themselves off the hook every time they failed to show up. "You're the strong one. You always bounce back. You're resilient, Odalys." They said it like it was a compliment, but it was just permission to ignore me. I looked down at the stitched wound along my ribs, the bruises blooming under the hospital gown, the IV feeding fluid into my arm like I couldn't even keep myself hydrated without help. Tough? No. I was barely holding it together. Glynis stood, brushing off her coat. "Anyway, don't be dramatic about all this. Your mom said they'll call once they're back stateside. Just rest." She reached into her bag and pulled out a Ziploc bag with my cracked phone and a white charger coiled neatly inside. They found this at the scene, she said. Also, maybe stay off social media for a bit. Rome's been really photogenic. She gave a faint, awkward smile, then turned toward the door. I didn't say goodbye. Didn't thank her. I just listened as her heels clicked down the hall and faded. Then silence again. Just the beeping machines. Just me. I stared at the bag in my lap. The charger. My phone, shattered but still intact. A ridiculous part of me had hoped for more. Maybe a note scribbled on a napkin, a card, a voicemail with Mom's voice. But no. All I got was a charger. And her silence, louder than anything she could have said. I didn't sleep much after Aunt Glynis left. I lay there, blinking at the ceiling, the charger still in my hand like it might suddenly change into something else, something real. I listened to the machine's hum. I watched the numbers blink. Nurses walked in, changed IV bags, took vitals. No one asked about visitors. Maybe they already knew the answer. Asserting. The next morning came in slowly. No sunrise, just a dull gray pushing through the curtains. By the third day, my body had begun healing faster than my spirit. The bruises were yellowing. My ribs still throbbed when I moved too fast, but I could sit up. I could eat. I could fake a polite smile for the daytime nurse, Kathy, when she asked if I wanted pudding. That morning, she wheeled in my tray like usual, bland soup, a lukewarm bottle of water, crackers in plastic, but something else sat on the edge of the tray, a plain white envelope. No stamps, no return address, just my name. Someone dropped this off? I asked. Kathy looked over her shoulder. It came through regular mail, I think. Must have been overnighted. I stared at it for a while after she left, my spoon hovering over the soup. I don't know why I hesitated. Maybe because a part of me already knew. I peeled the flap open and slid out a single folded sheet of paper. My name was at the top. The handwriting was neat, familiar. Dad's. He hadn't called, hadn't messaged. But now, this. I unfolded the paper and began reading. Odelis, I hope by the time you read this, you're stable and healing. We didn't intend for things to go this way, but certain decisions had to be made quickly. Lyle's opportunity abroad is significant, and any distractions, especially emotionally charged ones, could jeopardize his future. Your mother and I agreed that it would be best for everyone if we moved forward with clarity and purpose. Please don't make things harder. We love you in our own way. Dad. That was it. No apology. No mention of the crash. No mention of me almost bleeding out on the side of a highway. Just a sterile little note explaining that I wasn't part of the plan, that my silence was part of their image management. My hands trembled. The letter rustled like dry leaves. We love you in our own way. I'd heard that line my whole life. Translated, it meant, we love you, but only as long as it doesn't cost us anything. I folded the paper back up, hands shaky. For a second, I thought about tearing it, but something in me needed to hold on to it. Maybe as proof, or maybe because I needed to remember how this moment felt, so I wouldn't fall for it again. I sank deeper into the pillows and let my eyes close. But sleep didn't come. Instead, the crash came back. The rain had been steady that night. I'd been driving. The tires hissed along the highway like they were skating on oil. I remember glancing at my dad in the passenger seat, his phone glowing in his lap. Lyle was in the back, earbuds in, scrolling through photos of his packed bags. We were only 30 minutes from the airport. Why am I even here? I had asked, not quietly. Dad didn't look up. Because we're family. No, I had snapped. Because you need a ride. You always need something. But when it's me, suddenly I'm too emotional. He sighed. That sigh he used when I wasn't being convenient. You always take his side, I said again. Then headlights, then metal, then black. I don't remember the pain at first, just the way the air was sucked from the world, the weight of the steering wheel, the taste of blood. And later, sirens, a flashlight, then darkness again. And when I woke up, they were gone. Not in the waiting room, not in the hallway, not even a voicemail. just vanished. And now, 3 days later, I was supposed to accept it as strategy, as logistics, as what was best for Lyle. I clutched the letter to my chest and curled onto my side. It crinkled against my hospital gown. I bit my lower lip to keep the sob in, but it came anyway, not loud, not sharp, just a broken sound from the middle of me, like something deep and quiet had finally cracked. I must have looked ridiculous, grown woman, bruised, tucked in a hospital bed, crying into a letter from a man who called abandonment clarity. The door eased open, but I didn't move. I heard the nurse come in. Then a pause. Then her steps softly retreating. She didn't say a word. Didn't need to. I stayed like that for a while. Still, quiet. The letter pressed between my chest and my fist. Later that night, I turned on my phone. The screen flickered. Then a flood of unread messages. None from my parents. None from Lyle. But in the corner of the screen, a photo glowed. A snapshot from Rome. Them. All three of them. Smiling at a cafe table. Lyle in sunglasses. My mom toasting a glass of champagne. Dad with his hand on Lyle's shoulder. The message above it was from a group chat I was clearly no longer part of. Gonna be a killer week. Love y'all. I didn't delete it, didn't block the number. I just stared at it. Then tapped the side button and shut the phone off again. The screen went black. And so did whatever feeling had been holding on inside me. Not anger, not hope, just quiet. How the sky was the color of dishwater when they wheeled me out. I clutched a small tote bag against my lap, just a toothbrush, discharge papers, and the letter I couldn't throw away. No flowers, no balloons, just the echo of automatic doors hissing open behind me as Kathy, the nurse, gave me a quiet wave and turned back inside. I sat there, parked near the curb in a battered wheelchair, watching cars pull through the hospital loop, one after another, none slowing down for me. After 10 minutes, I reached for my phone, more out of habit than hope. Still no new messages. And then I heard it. Odalys? I turned. A man stood beside a silver sedan, tall, dark jacket, hair a little longer than I remembered, but neat. There was something familiar about the set of his jaw, the quiet way he looked at me like he already knew the shape of my pain. It's me, he said. Arlen, from Glen Cove High. It took a second. But then I saw it. The boy who used to sit 3 rows back in AP English, always scribbling in a notebook, barely speaking. The one they called Invisible Arlene. He used to eat lunch behind the band room vending machines. Now here he was, looking like a whole different man. Steady, clean-cut, older, sure, but calm in a way that made my chest ache. I blinked. You're kidding. He smiled gently. Not this time. I didn't argue when he took the handles of the wheelchair. Didn't ask how he knew. I was too drained. The car door clicked open, and with one hand, he helped me ease in. He didn't rush me. Didn't fill the silence with pity or small talk. Just waited. We pulled away slowly from the hospital. For a few minutes, there was only the sound of the turn signal, the thump of tires over a speed bump, and the hum of the heater. I turned toward the window. Did my parents call you? No. He didn't elaborate. Then, after a beat, he added, Funny thing. Someone reached out. Said you'd need a ride. Gave me the date, the time, even the hospital name. I frowned. Who? He glanced over, one hand resting on the steering wheel. Didn't leave a name. I studied him. The old Arlen I remembered would have stammered through that, would have flushed or over-explained, but this version, he just drove, steady as ever, like he had nothing to prove. We passed a gas station I used to bike to in middle school, then the old vet clinic where we took our golden retriever before Lyle forgot him at college. Arlene broke the silence again. You probably don't remember, but in sophomore year, you stood up to Mr. Hanlon. Remember him? Physics teacher? He nodded. He tried to give Michael Steele credit for your project. You called him out in front of the whole class, said, I didn't burn my fingers on sulfuric acid just so some golden boy could take the A. I smiled faintly. I was grounded for a week. Still, he said, that moment, it changed something for me. I looked over. How? He shrugged, a little sheepishly. Back then, I didn't talk, didn't know how. But seeing you speak up like that, it reminded me people could. I let that sit between us, not because I didn't care, but because I hadn't thought about that day in years. Funny how the world remembers pieces of you that you've buried. We passed my parents' street. I didn't say a word. I just watched their house flicker by. Shutters still crooked, Lyle's car missing from the driveway, a porch light left on like they were expecting someone. Anyone but me. Arlen didn't slow down. Instead, we kept driving. 10 minutes later, we pulled into a quiet cul-de-sac. At the end was a tidy brick duplex with a narrow porch. Not fancy, but neat. Clean. He parked. I don't understand, I said slowly. Someone prepaid for 2 weeks here, he said, stepping out. Said you'd need space. Gave your name. Left the rest to me. I hesitated. You don't even know me. He paused, resting his arm on the open car door. Maybe not well, but I remember how you looked the day you stood up for yourself, and I remember thinking, if someone like her can disappear, what chance does the rest of us have? That hit harder than I expected. Inside the duplex, everything smelled faintly of lavender. A small table had been set with a pitcher of water and a note. Fridge stocked, towels in closet. Rest. I stood there in the doorway while Arlen hovered near the entrance. He looked down for a moment, then asked quietly, Odalys, they really went to Italy without even calling you? I nodded once. Damn, he whispered. You deserved better. Even back then. He didn't stay. Didn't ask for anything. Just tipped an invisible hat and said, if you need anything, I'll be around. I live 15 minutes out. And then he was gone. I closed the door behind him. The lock clicked gently into place. For a while, I stood in the silence, listening to my own breath, to the space around me, to the truth still echoing in my chest. I wasn't okay. Not yet. But for the first time in days, I didn't feel invisible. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the pain, but because of what I saw when I opened my emails. The sheets rustled as I sat up, the quiet of the duplex pressing in around me. The rental was peaceful. Too peaceful. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, more to distract myself than anything else. But the screen was lit with a new notification. Security alert, storage access attempt. I blinked, then tapped. An email from the property manager. Someone had tried to enter my unit at 9:43 p.m., failed twice. Then, 15 minutes later, passcode successfully changed. My breath caught. I hadn't given anyone access, not even a spare key code. I tried logging into my account, but the screen flashed red. Unauthorized. Contact administrator. I rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe I was still half asleep, that maybe the painkillers were fogging things. But then, another email came in, this time forwarded from my old personal Gmail account. Subject: Clearing Odalys's things, Rome trip timeline. The first sender, Carson, then my mother. And a woman I didn't recognize, her email tagged as RE Agent Private Consult. I opened the thread. Carson had written first. Hey, now that she's stable, we should go ahead and clear the unit. She doesn't use any of that stuff. No point in paying rent on it. Then came Mom's reply. Agreed. Honestly, it's just more of her clutter. You know how she accumulates. No real plan, just piles and piles of sentiment. Let's streamline. The real estate agent chimed in. Noted. I can coordinate with a donation center and resale appraisers. Need a rough timeline, though. And then Carson again. We'll be in Rome until the 12th. If we authorize the lock change today, they can start clearing by Friday. Let's aim to have the unit emptied by the time we're back. She'll still be recovering anyway. The words were clean. Sterile, clutter, streamline, emptied. I scrolled down. A PDF was attached. Odalys Unit Inventory 2025 Q2, XLSX. I clicked it open. It wasn't just a list. It was a breakdown. White gold bracelet, minor wear, Ace, $320 resale. Professional certification folder, low relevance. Childhood quilt, frayed edges, donate. MacBook, older model, wipe and sell if functional. Large furniture, table, armchair, consider posting on local marketplace. Photos, no market value, dispose if unclaimed. A note at the bottom in Carson's handwriting. Some of this might still sell well. She's not mentally attached. Could have done this months ago. I couldn't move. My fingers lost grip. The phone hit the duvet with a soft thud. I just sat there, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't just thoughtless. It was planned, typed, budgeted, turned into a spreadsheet with bullet points and price tags. I wasn't a person in their eyes. I was inventory. My heart wasn't pounding. It was stalling. Like my body didn't quite know how to process what it had just seen. I placed my hand over my chest, just to feel something. Anything. The silence in the room stretched, thick and still. Even the hum of the heater felt distant. And then I remembered something. It came back like a ripple. Quiet. Sudden. I was 16. Carson had just returned from college after dropping out. I had my own room then. Light blue walls, a corkboard of science fair ribbons, and a paper swan I'd folded in middle school still hanging from the ceiling fan. One night, Mom knocked on the door. Her voice was syrupy sweet. "Honey, we need to give Carson his space. He's going through a lot. You're the flexible one, remember?" They had me move my things to the attic crawl space, right above the laundry room. No heat, no door. I'd packed without arguing, because I was the flexible one. That was the phrase they'd always used. Flexible, not cherished, not protected, just movable, disposable. I pressed my palms against my forehead. "God," I whispered, "they really don't love me." Saying it out loud didn't make it feel more real, but it did strip away whatever last sliver of illusion I had left. I wasn't just neglected. I wasn't just forgotten. I was a burden, a line item on a to-do list. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, curling slightly on the edge of the bed. My chest felt too full, but also like it was caving in at the same time. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't hurt, but because the betrayal was too calculated to grieve. It wasn't some heated argument or impulsive insult. It was deliberate strategy, typed, shared, approved, by people who knew my favorite childhood blanket, who held my hand after my tonsil surgery, who smiled in old Polaroids with me in their arms. I lay there until the first light of dawn crept in through the blinds. My head throbbed, but my thoughts were sharp. Not angry, not broken, just cold now, resolute. Because there, at the bottom of the spreadsheet, in the footer of the document, was a law firm's name. Corbin Drew, Estate Planning and Probate Services, and I knew what I had to do next. The next morning, I packed what little I had and walked to the law office whose name was on the document footer. I didn't call ahead. I didn't make an appointment. I just showed up, clutching a manila folder of printouts with shaking fingers and a face that hadn't fully learned how to smile again. The receptionist gave me a wary glance, but when I quietly said, "I just need to speak with someone about a property issue, please, it's urgent," she nodded and asked me to wait. 20 minutes later, I was ushered into a warm office filled with books and the faint smell of wood polish. The man behind the desk was in his early 60s, neatly dressed, cautious in his gaze. His nameplate read, "Kelman, partner." He stood and offered his hand. "Ms. Odelis Renner," I said, sitting down. "I believe your firm is handling some estate documents connected to my family. I'd like to see any public property filings that include my name." He didn't rush. He asked for ID, made a copy, then sat back at his desk and typed something into his system. The room went still except for the soft tapping of his fingers. And then, his face changed. He blinked, looked up at me again, then back at the screen. "Ms. Renner," he said, voice slower now. "It appears your name is still listed as a legal co-owner on the property at South Oak Drive." I stared at him. "I'm sorry, what?" "It's a home," he continued, pulling up the file. "Secondary residence." Refied in 2008 during the housing collapse. You were listed as co-signer and co-owner, a 50-50 split. And your name was never removed. I couldn't speak for a moment. South Oak Drive. I knew that place, the one they called the retreat house. It was where they sent Carson to clear his head every time he failed something, where Mom hosted her garden club luncheons, where they went when they needed a break. From me. I remembered signing something back then, when Dad pulled me aside one afternoon after class and said, "Sweetheart, we just need your name on this to help us out. It's nothing permanent. You'll be doing something good for the family." I was barely in my 20s. I said yes, because I always said yes. And now, 17 years later, that signature, faded and forgotten, had become a shield. "They're discussing liquidating that property," Mr. Kelman added, frowning. "But with your name still on the deed, they cannot do so legally without your full consent." My pulse steadied for the first time in days. I wasn't out of the fight. Not yet. And for once, the advantage was mine. I leaned in slightly. "I want to file a motion. Immediately. I don't consent to any sale or transfer. I want that on record, in writing." He nodded. "We can do that. I also want a certified notice sent to whoever's managing the listing. I know there's a realtor involved. I'll need their information." "It's in the email thread," I said, sliding the printout across the desk. He scanned the names, eyes pausing at the forwarded message subject. "Clearing Odalis' things, Rome trip timeline." His jaw clenched, just faintly. "I see," he murmured. "We'll proceed carefully." As he printed the forms and prepped the filing, I watched his hands, steady, professional. Like mine used to be when I worked in admin before the surgeries, before the distance, before I started shrinking into the corners of my own life. "I want it made clear," I added as he filled out the final field. "I am not just a beneficiary, I'm a stakeholder, a legal one." He paused, glanced up. Yes, you are." I left the office with a stamped copy of the motion and a printed letter addressed to the realtor. As I stepped out onto the sidewalk, a breeze caught the hem of my jacket. I zipped it up tighter, not from the cold, but from the weight of something shifting inside me. On the walk back, I took the long route. It wasn't intentional. My feet just turned that way, toward a part of town I hadn't visited in years. Past the corner pharmacy that still had an old soda fountain, past the high school track field where I'd once run relay, past a tiny bakery nestled between a laundromat and a church thrift shop. I stopped there. The glass was a little fogged, the lights inside warm, and I could still see, behind the counter, the tray of cinnamon rolls, just like the ones Mom used to bring me every Sunday before church. Always two. One for me, one for her. She stopped when I turned 18. She said I'd grown out of sweets. But maybe I hadn't. I went in and bought one. Just one. Asked them to wrap it carefully. At home, I placed it in my freezer. Didn't even take a bite. I just stood there, door open, cold air on my face, looking at that little bundle. And I said quietly, to no one in particular, "I'll eat it when I finally feel like I deserve sweetness again." Then I closed the freezer, turned off the kitchen light, and waited. Yet, 2 days later, just after I poured my first cup of coffee, the phone rang. No greeting, no pause. "Who told you about the deal?" The voice on the other end barked, sharp, high-pitched, and livid. I didn't recognize the number, but the voice was familiar enough. Laura Kendrick, my parents' real estate agent. I set my mug down slowly. "I'm sorry?" She exhaled hard, then hissed through clenched teeth. "You filed a legal block on the sale. That wasn't part of the plan." "What plan?" I asked, steady. "You're not even living in the state. Your name's been dormant for years." "And yet," I said calmly, "it's still on the deed." Silence, then a scoff. "They've been preparing this transition for months," she muttered, like I was inconveniencing her vacation plans. "Renovation teams, staging consultations, early buyers lined up. You really want to tank all that for a technicality?" "No," I replied. "I want to tank it because that's my name on the land, my credit history. My legal stake. Not a technicality, just a fact." Laura didn't speak after that. Just a hard click of disconnection. No goodbye. I stood in my kitchen a minute longer, watching the sun hit the window glass. Some part of me thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. That afternoon, while I was sorting old paperwork by the kitchen table, my phone buzzed again. This time, a name I couldn't ignore. Carson, my brother. I didn't pick up the first time, or the second, but on the third ring, I answered. Hey, he said, his voice flat but laced with fake warmth. Heard you've been busy. I said nothing. He let out a forced laugh. Look, I get it. You're upset, but do we really need to turn this into some courtroom drama? You're the one who didn't tell me about the listing, I said. It was going to be a surprise. For who? I asked. Because I've already had my fair share. He sighed. You've been out of the loop for years, Deli. Mom and Dad figured you wouldn't be interested, thought you'd moved on. They didn't ask. He paused. Well, you sure made your point now. You've complicated things. His voice dropped lower. That fake sugar in his tone disappeared. Just know this, he said. You're not going to like how this turns out if you keep pushing. I leaned back in the chair. That a threat, Carson? No. It's a reality check. I waited a beat, then replied. I've already spent too many years regretting how silent I was. I picked up the motion copy off the table. This, I won't regret. He hung up. I didn't flinch. Later that evening, I stood at the sink, rinsing plates from dinner that barely touched my appetite. Carson's words played over again in my mind, but it wasn't just what he said. It was the way he said it, like when I was 19 and he borrowed my car for a week, said he'd bring it back after finals. He never did. Dad told me to drop it. He needed it more than you, Mom said. That was the first time I understood what erasure by family felt like. But not anymore. The next morning, I stepped out for air and walked to the small cafe 2 blocks from my place. I needed noise, people around, something normal. I was sipping coffee near the window when a woman slid into the seat across from me like it was the most natural thing in the world. I'm Cheryl, she said, resting a worn leather folder on the table. We've never officially met, but I used to be treasurer on your parents' HOA board. I blinked. Okay, she leaned in. I overheard your name in a meeting, more than once. It didn't sit right. My stomach tightened. They've been using your name, she said quietly. On authorizations, financial forms, backdated things. I kept some copies because it felt wrong. She opened the folder. Inside were printouts, emails from the HOA board. Authorizations signed Odellis R. on dated forms from the years I was still in college, halfway across the country. I touched one of the pages. The handwriting wasn't mine. The signature. Almost, but off. How did They pulled strings, said you gave permission verbally, that you were just unavailable to sign, but they used it, voted with it, collected on it. I kept flipping. Tax exemption documents, utility bill shifts, even HOA project approvals that were all passed because both owners consented. And I'd had no clue. Cheryl sighed. I thought you should know. I looked up, met her eyes. Why now? Because the truth's overdue. And you're finally home. She stood and walked away. I stayed there a while. Didn't cry, didn't scream. Just sat in that cafe booth, hands trembling a little as I gathered the papers and slid them back into the folder. They never thought I'd come back, I whispered to myself. Never thought I'd open my mouth, but I had, and I would. By the time I returned home, the sky had gone gray, the air heavy like it was holding something. I went straight to the freezer, opened the door. The cinnamon roll was still there, wrapped, untouched. I stared at it. My breath steadied. Not yet. But I was closer. I closed the freezer gently, then walked to the table and opened the folder again. There, tucked into the very back, was one more page I hadn't noticed earlier. My name, my social security number, next to a loan application. I didn't blink. My social security number sat at the top of the page, plain as daylight, right above a loan application I never signed. A home equity loan, 6 figures, taken out during a year I was living 3 states away. The signature at the bottom, neat, slanted, too polished. I'd never looped my R like that in my life. My breath stayed steady, but my hand shook just enough to smear the edge of the print as I turned the paper over, hoping, foolishly, for something else. An explanation, maybe even a mistake. But no. On the back was the lender's contact info, a local credit union I didn't bank with, a timestamp, and a list of uploaded ID documents. Whoever had done this had scanned my license, my old one, from before I'd moved. And someone must have had access to it. I didn't go to sleep that night. I stayed up, lights low, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. I stared at the folder like it might burst into flames if I kept looking. By 7:05 the next morning, I was outside the Housing Authority building. No appointment, no makeup, no time for anything but facts. I handed the folder to the intake clerk and said, "I believe my name and identity were used to take out a fraudulent loan." The woman flipped through the pages, her expression unreadable. When she saw the Social Security number, she squinted, then tapped something into her computer. She looked up. "Hang on a minute." 10 minutes passed. When she came back, her tone had changed. "We've been watching that street for a while," she said, voice low. "You're not the first to call." That stopped me. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said carefully, "this isn't the first suspicious filing tied to properties on that block, some involving unusual signatures, long-time ownerships being flipped overnight. The bank flagged a few, then it quieted down." "So someone's been running a scam." She didn't answer directly, just said, "You'll need to file a sworn affidavit, and we'll open a fraud case. We'll notify the lender, but you should contact them too." I did. I sat in my car for nearly an hour after that before dialing the credit union. When I gave them the account reference number, the man on the line asked me to hold. A minute later, another voice picked up, softer, older. "I'm going to be honest with you," the woman said. "We've seen a few of these. Documents filed with the right IDs but the wrong digital signatures. Your address didn't match your tax record that year." Of course it didn't. I hadn't even been in the state. That afternoon, after stopping home to gather more papers, I got a text I wasn't expecting. "Special HOA meeting, tomorrow evening. Mandatory attendance, urgent." I stared at it for a moment. Then another message came in, from Cheryl. "They're hearing whispers. Some folks are mad, others just confused, but they're starting to talk." I texted back, "I'll be there, but I'm not just bringing questions, I'm bringing proof." The next evening, just before 6, I walked into the HOA community hall with a copy of every document I had, neatly labeled, organized in a folder thicker than the one Cheryl had handed me days ago. The room was packed, neighbors I hadn't seen in years. Others I only vaguely remembered from holiday lights competitions or mailbox mix-ups. Whispers stopped when I walked in. Cheryl met me at the side door. "Your parents are here," she murmured. "They came early, sat in the front." Of course they did. I stepped to the front, cleared my throat, and faced the crowd. "I know most of you as neighbors. Some of you, barely at all. But you know my parents. You know the stories they've told, the version of events they've shaped for years. Tonight, I want to tell mine." The room was quiet, tense. I opened the folder and began. First, a mortgage loan, filed in my name, without my consent. Here's the signature, compared with my actual one, notarized yesterday. I held up the papers. Second, authorization sent to this HOA, under my name, during the years I was living out of state. Here's my college enrollment to confirm I wasn't even physically here. A few gasps, a couple murmurs. My mother shifted in her seat. Her mouth opened, but I kept going. Third, utility rerouting with forged access dated back to— "That's enough," my mother snapped. "You're blowing this out of proportion. This is family." "No," I said, holding up a hand. "This is fraud." I reached for the notarized letter Cheryl had provided. "Cheryl, would you mind?" Cheryl stood, stepped forward, and read aloud. "I, Cheryl Dean, former HOA treasurer, testify that Odelis R. was not present nor known to have participated in the meetings or approvals listed here. I noted the discrepancy and kept copies due to personal concern over procedural violations. The room fell silent. A man from the third row raised a hand. So, did your parents really use your ID? I looked directly at my mother. She didn't answer. My father stood up and muttered, "This is all performative garbage," then stormed out the side door, the slam of it echoing. My mother remained seated, face frozen, lips tight, like she wanted to disappear. I didn't say anything cruel. I didn't point or gloat. I just said quietly, "I didn't do this to shame you. I did it because it had to stop." A woman near the back clapped. Then another. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just respectful. I closed the folder and walked out, shoulders straight, heart steady. The air outside had cooled, the last light of evening stretching long shadows across the sidewalk. I passed the bakery on the corner, same one I'd ignored every day since returning. This time, I went in. I picked a cinnamon roll from the display, paid in cash. Not for her, for me. When I got home, I placed it on a small plate, poured a glass of water, and sat quietly in the kitchen. I was about to put the plate in the fridge for later when I noticed a thin envelope on the floor by the door. No return address. I opened it. Inside was a check, signed by my father. The envelope had no return address, no logo, no stamp from a law office, just my name, handwritten in that familiar slanted print I hadn't seen in a while. I stood with it in my hand for a long minute at the mailbox, the cinnamon roll still warm in its paper bag tucked under my arm. I opened it standing right there on the porch. The letter inside wasn't long, just a torn sheet of yellow-lined paper and a check folded twice. No greeting. Just, "This should make up for everything. Come home for Christmas." Dad. The check? It was for the exact amount I'd spent cleaning up the fraudulent loan. Down to the dollar. I carried it inside without a word, placed it on the kitchen counter, and stared at it while the daylight slowly dimmed behind the blinds. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. There was no dramatic soundtrack in my head, just silence. I sat at the table and unfolded the check again. The signature was unmistakably his. Bold, firm, just like the way he used to sign the bottom of our report cards when Mom didn't want to be bothered. For a second, I tried to imagine him writing this out. Was he angry? Guilty? Did he believe this paper was a bandage that could fix a decade of cuts? I let the thought pass through and then out. I didn't rip the check. I didn't rush to the bank either. Instead, I went to the closet in my hallway, pulled down an old shoebox, and slid the check inside. Right on top of the notarized affidavit, the forged loan documents, and a photo of my house taken the week I moved in alone. On the lid of the box, in black marker, I wrote one word: proof. Later that week, as the neighborhood started stringing up lights and wreaths, I got a call from my cousin Lydia. I hadn't heard her voice in years. "Odelis," she said, almost unsure I'd pick up. I heard what happened." She didn't say from who, didn't need to. "We never knew," she added quietly. "We just believed what they said. About you. About how you ran off. Or didn't help out. I feel awful." I leaned back in the kitchen chair, phone pressed between shoulder and ear, watching the steam rise from my tea. "I'm not mad at you," I said. "I'm just tired." She paused, then asked softly, "Would you come to the family dinner this year?" "I'll be there. So will Aunt Mel. No pressure." I thanked her, but I didn't go. Instead, I spent that evening doing something I hadn't let myself do in years. I started rearranging the house, not to make it look nice for visitors, but to feel like it was mine. The family portraits? I took them down. I didn't burn them. Just packed them in a drawer. In their place, I framed snapshots of myself, hiking alone, smiling by a lake, sitting on a park bench with a cup of coffee, and no one needing anything from me. Then I hung a small wooden sign I found at the flea market last summer. It said, "You don't need permission to begin again." And I meant it. By January, I'd started volunteering at the local library twice a week. They needed someone to help with teen programming, and one girl, Marnie, showed up every Tuesday after school like clockwork. A little too quiet. Eyes a little too sharp. One day, while sorting returned books, she asked without looking up, "Did your mom ever say stuff to you that made you feel less?" I glanced at her, then placed a thick novel back on the shelf. "Every week," I said. "Sometimes every day." She blinked. "What did you do?" I took a breath. I believed her for a while, that I wasn't enough, that I was too emotional, too ambitious, too me. But later, I stopped waiting for her to change, and I decided I didn't need her to see me. I just needed to see myself. Marnie didn't reply right away, but the next Tuesday, she brought a book she wanted to write her own notes in. That night, after the shift, I walked home past the bakery. The sign in the window read, "New Year, New Recipes." I smiled. Back home, I went to the bookshelf and reached for the old cookbook I once gave my mother, the one she returned in a plastic grocery bag. The spine creased like it had never been opened. Now, it sat between dog-eared paperbacks and new recipe cards. I had bookmarked 3 of the cinnamon roll pages, and the corners were faintly dusted with flour. I ran a finger along the edge. People always think closure comes wrapped in some dramatic finale. Screams, apologies, tears. But mine was quiet. It happened slowly. In the unspoken refusal to go back. In the silence that followed truth. In that one cinnamon roll, bought for myself. I didn't get the apology I wanted. But I gave myself something better, permission to stop waiting for one. I'm not angry, I just don't visit anymore. Do you think I was too cold? Or just done being burned?